The animal standing in front of you is 12 meters long. It weighs 8 tons. Its skull alone is 1.5 meters from snout to the back of the brain case. And the brain inside that skull, the organ doing all the thinking, is roughly the size and shape of a bent banana. For a long time, that comparison settled the argument. Small brain, simple mind. The assumption was almost universal, and it shaped how we imagined these animals for over a century, as creatures of pure reflex, as biological machines running on instinct, with no more inner life than a thermostat. That assumption is now one of the most actively contested ideas in modern paleontology, because it turns out that thinking, really thinking, doesn't require a big brain. It requires the right brain, and some dinosaurs, it now appears, had exactly that. The question of how dinosaurs thought is not one question. It's a spectrum, stretching from the sauropods, the largest animals to ever walk the earth, whose cognitive demands were minimal by design, all the way to the small feathered theropods, whose brains, relative to their bodies, approached the complexity of some modern birds. Between those extremes lies one of the richest unsolved problems in vertebrate paleontology. What was actually happening inside the heads of the animals that dominated this planet for 165 million years? To find out, we need to go somewhere most people have never been. Not to the fossil beds, though we'll get there. Not to the museum halls, though they matter too. We need to go inside the skull.
The tool that made this possible is called an endocast, a cast of the interior surface of the brain case, either formed naturally by mineral-filled sediment over millions of years, or reconstructed digitally from CT scans of fossilized skulls. Endocasts don't preserve brain tissue, but they preserve shape, and shape tells you an enormous amount. The size of the olfactory bulbs tells you how much of the brain was devoted to smell. The development of the optic lobes tells you about visual processing. The relative size of the cerebellum tells you about motor coordination and balance. By analyzing these shapes across dozens of species, paleoneurologists have been able to sketch a picture of dinosaur cognition that is far more varied and far more interesting than anything the old walnut brain model could accommodate. And some of what they found has genuinely surprised the field. Take olfaction first, because it's the sense that most dramatically rewrites the dinosaur story. In a landmark 2008 study published in Proceedings of the Royal Society B, paleontologist Darla Zelenitsky and her colleagues measured the olfactory ratios, the relative size of the smell-processing brain regions, across 23 non-avian dinosaur species. What they found was that several theropods, including tyrannosaurs, had olfactory ratios comparable to modern turkey vultures, birds capable of detecting a carcass from kilometers away purely through scent. Think about what that means for how a T-Rex experienced its world. It was not simply seeing the landscape, but processing sensory information is one thing. What the brain does with that information, how it stores it, integrates it, uses it to guide behavior, is something different. And this is where the story becomes genuinely extraordinary. The dromaeosaurids, Velociraptor and its relatives, sit at the high end of the dinosaur encephalization quotient scale, consistently across multiple independent studies. Their forebrains were proportionally developed in ways associated in modern animals with flexible behavior, the ability to respond to novel situations, to learn from experience, to adjust strategy rather than simply repeat fixed patterns. Is that intelligence? It depends on your definition. But researchers who work with living birds, the direct descendants of these animals, are clear that behavioral flexibility of this kind requires something more than pure instinct.
It requires a brain capable of forming predictions, testing them against outcomes, and updating behavior accordingly. That's not a thermostat. That's something else. If following the science of ancient cognition this closely is something that matters to you, subscribe now. The expeditions ahead go deeper, and the discoveries only become more surprising. The nesting record adds another dimension entirely. When Jack Horner's team excavated the Maiasaura colony in Montana's Two Medicine Formation in the 1980s, they found not just eggs and hatchlings, but evidence of sustained parental behavior. Juveniles with worn teeth suggesting they were being fed, adults returning repeatedly to the same sites. This was not the behavior of a brain running a fixed reproductive program. It was the behavior of an animal making ongoing decisions about resource investment, location, and offspring welfare. And the more recently discovered bone pathology evidence makes a different kind of argument. Paleontologist Bruce Rothschild's analysis of healed stress fractures in hadrosaur foot bones found patterns consistent with repetitive locomotor behavior, the kind of physical signature left in modern captive animals by psychological states. Something was driving these animals to move in ways that left physical marks. We cannot call it thought in any human sense, but we can say the neural architecture that drives goal-directed, sustained, experience-modified behavior was there. And now, the piece is evidence that has generated the most careful and most important debate in the field. In 2023, a team led by Kai Kasper at Heinrich Heine University published a study proposing that the encephalization quotient of T. rex might approach that of modern primates.
The paper was immediately and substantively challenged by other paleoneurologists, including a detailed rebuttal by Christian Gutierrez Ibanez and colleagues, who argued that the scaling relationship used in the original paper was inappropriate, that using mammalian brain-body allometry to estimate dinosaur cognition introduces significant errors, and that the comparison to primates was not scientifically supportable. The debate is ongoing. It has not been resolved. But here is what I find most significant about it. Both sides agree that T. rex's brain was more complex than the old model suggested. The disagreement is about degree, not direction. That is a profound shift, and it happened within a single generation of research. 66 million years ago, a troodon moved through a twilight forest with eyes wide in low light, reading a chemical landscape we can barely imagine, processing sounds in frequency ranges our ears can't detect, making decisions about where to hunt, when to return to a nest, how to respond to an animal it had encountered before. Whether any of that was accompanied by something we might recognize as experience, whether there was something it was like to be that animal, is a question science cannot yet answer. The tools for measuring subjective experience don't exist. Perhaps they never will. But what the last 30 years of endocast research, behavioral fossil analysis, and comparative neurology have established is this: the dinosaur brain was not a simple organ running a simple program.
It was a varied, species-specific, evolutionarily refined instrument, and in some lineages it was building toward a complexity whose full expression we can still watch today. Every time a crow solves a problem it has never encountered before, or a parrot responds to the loss of a companion with something that looks unmistakably like grief. Those animals are not metaphors for dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs. The lineage never ended. And the investigation into how they thought across 165 million years of deep time and into the present is one of the most extraordinary things science is currently doing. The more I follow this research, the more I believe we've been asking the wrong question all along. But how much of what we call thinking did they already have? The investigation continues because there is a specific animal, the one with the highest documented encephalization quotient in the entire non-avian dinosaur record, whose brain anatomy, hunting strategy, and nesting behavior suggest a cognitive life more complex than anything else we found in the fossil record. Its name is Troodon, and what lived inside that skull is still being worked out. That investigation is waiting.